Emergent. My name is Reed Summers. Pleasure to be with you again. Every 2 weeks, we are examining the front lines of the UFO UAP phenomenon, unidentified anomalous phenomena, as they are now called, and considering the frontline reality of the disclosure of the UAP phenomenon to the public, as well as our eventual collective human response to what many increasingly consider to be contact with some form of non-human intelligence. So with that, welcome to the front lines. Here on the show, I seek to ask some of the hard questions and open up some of the more difficult sides of the conversation. I also endeavor to examine not only the human factor, but the non-human factor, because as I believe, there is a non-human set of entities in our physical space, and we need to consider that and account for that. They have an intent too. They have some sort of programmatic purpose for being in our world, I think we can say at this point. What is that purpose? We need to be asking the questions that probe at that enigma. And as we do that on this show, I hope to consider how this phenomenon and this non-human intelligence might be connected or influencing or being influenced by events in our world and the forces that are reshaping the human landscape and really changing and altering the nature of the human experience. And with that, as always, I endeavor to expand out to a bigger picture, to go beyond the events of the day and to consider the larger evolutionary thresholds we might be standing upon and how this might change our world, what implications this has for our human destiny. And all told, show by show, I hope to essentially have the conversations that we need to be having. Because as I look out into the field of both the community aware of the UFO UAP reality, but also the broader public, I don't see the essential conversation happening nearly as much as I think it needs to. And time is ticking. We are 80 years into this anomalous visitation to our world by non-human craft and technologies operated presumably by non-human entities. And so there is consequence to not being able to assess the phenomenon, to respond to the phenomenon, and to move into this new era where we account for life beyond our world and our place in what might ultimately be some kind of ecosystem of life, of intelligent, sentient life. If you're enjoying the show and these conversations, please like, subscribe, share. You know what to do. It's the first time I've asked you, so I didn't just wait this long for a reason. I actually, frankly, forgot to ask, but it would be great if you subscribed, shared the show with others, and brought other people into this essential conversation that I hope to take into 2025. A lot of exciting guests in the new year, a lot of important topics. I have no fewer than 30 shows basically scripted or conceived. And so each one, my hope, is walking around the full entirety of the phenomenon of contact with NHI and the observables of that contact in the form of UAP, and probing at its heart and center, understanding we don't have all the evidence we need. We can't come to firm conclusions yet, but we can ask the right questions that lead us to collect better evidence and allow us to form a starting assessment that is driven not just by entertaining possibilities, but by focusing on greater and more responsible probabilities. That's my hope in the coming year. So please share the show with others, and hopefully it can grow. As 2024 comes to a close, and I consider this my last show with you, I just wanted to step back, look at the world. A lot is happening. I think we stand at a very uncertain precipice geopolitically. The nature of armed conflicts and political violence is certainly escalating. The ongoing trade wars and economic competition between superpowers is escalating. And the reality and potential of a nuclear confrontation, unfortunately, is also escalating. I think this is a highly escalatory time geopolitically. At the same time, the black swan events are occurring. Revolutions are sweeping through countries, for example, Syria, sweeping governments out of power and presenting the world and the region with uncertainty that has to be managed. And so much going on between human beings worldwide. And at the same time, let's not forget that we stand upon the foundations of this earth as a natural environment, and it is also changing. 2024 was the hottest year on record. 2023, the second hottest year on record. These are unparalleled years and days we are having on planet Earth, largely due to human-induced climate alteration, environmental destruction, the alteration of ecosystems, the loss of biodiversity. We are having a tremendous impact upon our planet. And when you step back and look at the 20th century, the last roughly 100 years, it truly is an unparalleled and brief sliver in the historic rise of human civilization, the emergence of the Homo sapiens sapiens, our species, and the emergence of life all told over the 4+ billion years of this Earth's history. It is an unparalleled time. And into this time, who has arrived? It appears there is a modern wave of UFO, UAP sightings that are taking place at the same time our civilization is entering periods of peak stress and peak risk, and at a time when we are altering fundamentally the natural fabric of the Earth and its potential habitability for a very long time to come. Is that a coincidence? Are they connected? I would say they are connected. And I think that's all the more reason we need to be having these conversations into the new year. Also, on the UFO UAP front, we have a lot going on. We have major hearings in the U.S. House of Congress, bringing forward new whistleblowers, new revelations regarding secret programs within at least the U.S. government surrounding crashed vehicles and reverse engineering of technologies of potential non-Earth origin. We have a massive spate of drone sightings and anomalous incursions taking place in the UK, in the US, not just in the last month, but all year and back into 2023. We'll talk about that tonight. And, there's more to come. There are more whistleblowers who are, to my knowledge, intending to step forward. There are documents that are planning to be released. There are major stories breaking about the UFO phenomenon in the early months of the coming new year, even as we have a new administration coming into office that has expressed its intent to undertake some form and some degree of disclosure as well. So sit tight, buckle up. It might be a very interesting 2025. I certainly think it will be. I'd like to, before we dive in, and I welcome my guests for tonight, talk about the drone situation because it is quite interesting and quite alarming. And no one really knows the origin of these craft, the true government position, which seems to be very confused, very scattered, and where this might lead us ultimately. And if there is a component of a non-human intelligence operating these craft, what is their intent to do so? What is this a part of? I know a lot of people are asking these questions. I'd like to start with just some news of the day. I'm looking at some news from the front lines in New Jersey, which seems to be the epicenter of the drone activity in the last few weeks. Interesting stuff right here. I'll just read this to you. Apparently, a UAP drone has landed and crashed in Hillsborough, New Jersey, and there are multiple agencies, including some wearing hazmat suits, on the scene. There are reports. This is one by Chris Smith, a U.S. member of Congress, saying that law enforcement has tracked devices coming from the water and going into the water, specifically 50 UFOs. Interesting stuff. In another report, allegedly an F-16 approached one of these objects in the air, and the object was able to rapidly depart the scene far faster than the F-16, which, what kind of speed are we talking about? What kind of ability to accelerate would that be? And there are reports of orbs and spheres. And if we can go to the slides here, this is one that made the rounds, I believe, taken by a commercial airline pilot, of an orb descending from high altitude, what looks like inches from the surface of the tarmac. And then once vehicles and law enforcement attempt to approach the vehicle, it shoots up into the air vertically. Wild stuff. At the same time, this is on the back of a whole spate of drone or UAS sightings in the UK. And I'd like to turn again to my slides here. This is a Twitter post I made, let's see, what it would have been maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, just kind of summarizing some of the high points of what I had been seeing. Apparently, the U.S. Air Force Office of Special Investigations interviewing residents on the ground in the UK, a shift to encrypted communication, and a no-lights order mandated to base aircraft. reports of an orange ball in the sky, and military jeeps around the village. Now, I believe this was the Lakenheath facility, which historically has housed U.S. nuclear warheads, and I believe is slated to do so as well. It is a destination for the forward deployment of U.S. nuclear weapons in the U.K., which, to my understanding, is due to the escalations currently taking place with Russia. So UFOs have long had a close association to nuclear sites, and here again, are we seeing that? It's a question. Here we have some reports of agents from the Air Force OSI in the Suffolk area of the UK talking to local people, and a sudden shift to using encrypted data link instead of open radio communication when speaking from aircraft to the ground. So, this is interesting. And why is this happening? And we'll talk about this later in the show, possible scenarios at play, the motive and intent of the various actors that might be involved. But it's evolving moment by moment. Even just this evening, there is now a whole new round of reported sightings at the Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany, which is a key U.S. Air Force installation in the southwest of the country. So, we're watching this unfold in front of our eyes. It's quite something. And I think we can just say, are these UFOs? We don't know. Are they alien? We don't know. But they are UAP. If we're going to shift from unidentified flying object to unidentified anomalous phenomena, well, these are anomalous and they most certainly are unidentified. And so we are talking about some form of unidentified craft. We don't know the origin. The capabilities seem to be greater than that of commercial or hobbyist drones. The size of the craft, the size of small cars or even an SUV, speeds extremely fast, obviously, if they can outpace an F-16, flying in formations, at times reportedly or allegedly around some sort of mothership which the drones were circling. This doesn't sound to me like, your local chapter of the U.S. Drone Society. And if this is a foreign adversary, it is quite a confrontational set of events, tantamount to an act of war, given that these are flying over sensitive military installations. The Pentagon has come out and they have said very clearly that they do not believe or they do not have evidence that this is foreign adversarial technology. And yet they have also made a complete denial that this is U.S. government technology. So what then is it? And I have a few clips to play of some official statements, one by John Kirby, the other by Mr. Wheeler, an official with the FBI. And these, I think, highlight the mixed messaging, the stumbling communication, and the frustrating nature of what we're seeing in this set of drone incursions. So let's watch these two videos.
With what you're looking at, how can you credibly tell people that there is no public safety threat, there's no national security threat, that there's no reason to believe that a foreign government is involved?
Because the analysis thus far in an investigation that is ongoing has not revealed any national security or malicious intent or criminal activity. But, Jackie, I would remind you, we're at the beginning here, not the end. There's a lot more work to be done, and we're working closely with state and local authorities to gain more information. I would argue that we're moving pretty well here with a sense of energy to try to figure out what we can do to learn more about this. We're still in the middle of an ongoing investigation, and I'm up here explaining to you and let you know what we know so far, what we believe so far. If information comes to light that changes that characterization, then my goodness, we'll be the first ones to let you know. But right now, there's just no indication that this is some sort of foreign malign activity or, in fact, even criminal. Well, I can also tell you that if the president, as commander-in-chief, believed, based on the information that he'd been given, that there was a national security threat at play here, or even a public safety threat at play here, he would issue the appropriate directives to not only law enforcement, but perhaps even the military if that was needed. I want to go back to something I said at the top. There has been no evidence of any of this activity in or near restricted spaces.
That's not what the senators said in the letter. They said, in fact, that they've been observed maneuvering near critical infrastructure, sensitive locations, including reservoirs and military installations, and cited a concern from law enforcement about public safety threats because a medevac helicopter was prevented from transporting a seriously injured patient for care because of the presence of these drones.
I stand by my opening statement.
Can you make that make more sense?
Can you make that
You're
make more
telling me
sense?
we don't know what the hell these drones are in New Jersey are? Is that correct?
That's right.
That's crazy. I mean, that's crazy. That's madness that we don't know what these drones are.
Sir, the FBI and our Newark field office, along with the state and local partners there, the Bureau is actively investigating the situation you mentioned, just the unexplained sighting of drone activity over that part of New Jersey. We do not attribute that to an individual or a group yet. We're investigating, but I don't have an answer of who's responsible for that, of one or more people that are responsible for those drone flights. But we're actively investigating. It is concerning.
Is the public at risk? Is public safety at risk? Are we concerned that there are nefarious intentions that could cause either national security or a public safety incident that would put Americans at risk?
There's nothing that is known that would lead me to say that, but we just don't know, and that's the concerning part.
Okay. So, what are they? We don't know. Are they ours? No, they're not. Are they adversarial? No, they're not. Should we be concerned? Nah. And that kind of no answer, that there's no indication that there's any security risk, public safety risk. I mean, if they're following the evidence, so be it. Maybe that's accurate. But I find it requires somewhat this suspension of disbelief here that, craft of this size with these capabilities to evade modern anti-drone technologies, as has been also reported, are not a potential threat of some kind. So I'd like to put this up on screen. This is an official statement regarding the drones in New Jersey that came out recently. And alongside it is a report from a facility. Let me get the name of this. Oh, yeah. The Picantini Arsenal. So, the statement that, these are not flying over any sensitive airspace. Well, this facility is a U.S. Army Futures Command center that, among other things, focuses on microwave weapons, folks. And if you're not aware, there is a connection there with the UFO phenomenon. And so is that related? I don't know. But, that seems like a pretty sensitive facility to myself. At the same time, this came out or was leaked today. A fireman said that he was given this by the New Jersey Division of Fire Safety. I can't confirm this document. It might not be authentic. It's possible. But basically saying, do not approach these craft. And also saying that, electronic devices and two-way radio system communications may not function in the area. That's either a statement of the drone's capabilities or the effort to impede or down or obstruct the drone's abilities to communicate. So, this is a serious situation that we're looking at, and it's unfolding day by day. It'll be very interesting to see where we're at into January and February with this issue, especially as it goes global, as it reportedly is. There's reports in Kazakhstan, apparently, Japan, other countries in Europe. So what is going on here? Which I would say is somewhat of a perfect storm for today's conversation. With me today is good friend and someone I've gotten to know and appreciate talking to always, Mitch Randall. Mitch is heading a project called Skywatch, which is attempting to put the abilities, the tools for tracking of UAP in citizen hands. And if there isn't a better case study and really a lost opportunity to find out what the technologies that Mitch has worked on and what the project and the plan that he has in place could do, here it is. We could potentially be gaining true citizen-generated data regarding these craft in the American Northeast. What are their tracks? Where are they originating? Where are they transiting to? And we are not able, as citizens, to gain that data. All we can do is hang on the coat of government as they give us, sound bites and a pat on the back to say there's no problem here. Don't worry about it. So I think it's a perfect storm on the topic of citizen tracking of UAP, which is, in my view, part of a bigger cause for citizen disclosure, which is citizens having the ability, the knowledge, and the tools to disclose part or a great deal of this phenomenon with or without government participation. So, with that, a segue. I'd like to welcome Mitch on the show. Mitch, if you're with us.
Hello.
There
Thank
we
you very
are.
much. Great to be here.
Great to be here. Great, Mitch. Well, I'm going to read your bio and talk up your laurels a little bit, and then we're going to get into some great conversation about your project, your background, what you'd like to see happen with citizen tracking and in disclosure overall. Mitch joined the National Center for Atmospheric Research, NCAR, my institution for over a decade, in 1989, where he developed airborne, ground-based, and mobile scientific weather research radars. Mitch pioneered software-defined radar, SDR, techniques and deployed them at NCAR, at NASA, and NOAA radars. He developed a software-based Dopplerization technique for incoherent magnetron radars. Remember that, folks. The quiz is on Monday. To create the Doppler on wheels, the DOW, tornado chasing trucks as seen on TV. His technologies became the industry standard for the meteorological weather radar community in the mid-90s. Mitch is a prolific inventor with licensed toys on the market. One of his inventions was recognized in Time Magazine's Best Inventions of 2007. Mitch, you're going to tell us what that was. And then in 2021, Mitch became a research team member of Harvard's Galileo project, where he developed and deployed the proof of concept Skywatch passive radar. Mitch is the lead author of the paper describing the system in the Journal of Astronomical Instrumentation. Mitch, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. I was enthralled just watching you in the first part of the show.
Oh, great.
I mean, it's crazy what's going on out there, and you expressed it so eloquently.
Thank you. Yes. Well, I do my best with words and thoughts. So we'll dive in deeper. I'd like for you to tell us about yourself, how you became interested in the phenomenon, research into the phenomenon, and just generally involved. I would also like to say, for those watching, I invite you to ask your questions to Mitch. There's a link to a Q&A platform called Slido. We should be posting that in the chat right this minute. So please queue up your questions, upvote each other's and downvote each other's questions, and we will go with most upvoted first. So with that, Mitch, take it away and give us a little bit of your story.
Oh, well, I've been interested in this subject for a long, long time. Even when it was embarrassing to be interested in this subject, for decades. And, it has this cycle to it, or, something will happen and it will seem like, oh my God, there was a big sighting. This is going to come out and everybody's going to know about it. And then it just kind of fades away. And then, just that's been happening for so long. But I really thought when Grush came out and I saw that, I thought, this is it, man. They cannot put that proverbial toothpaste back in the tube, right? I really thought that this was it. And about a year later, I realized, oh, right, this is that cycle I've been seeing for decades. They don't really put the toothpaste back in the tube. That's not really the job. They just let it dry up. As long as the officials don't come out and confirm it, it just turns into, it just kind of fades away, turns into confusion. I mean, Bob Lazar came out with his thing, just turns into confusion, and I know everybody has opinions about all these things. Also, John Lear came out with a bunch of stuff. And then decades before that, it was, there was books written. I follow Richard Geldrich, and he always brings up these historical things that he's running into. They basically have had this kind of brush with disclosure over and over again over the decades. Right. Now, for me, what happened to me? Something happened to me in the last 5 years. Is I really thought, wait a minute, why is it thought to be absurd that aliens are here on the planet? And it occurred to me it's only because of a social, some kind of social stigma about it. Because if you can really manage to put all that aside, the social stigma, and just think through it, you realize, wait a minute, life evolved here on Earth. Why wouldn't it evolve on other planets? And there's been billions of years. And if you actually work through the numbers, it's not that hard for societies to have populated other planets and be all over this universe. So, once you get there, things open up a little bit. And then another thing that really happened to me was I realized, I've always been looking for, like a video, because I'm from science background. I'm always looking for this tangible evidence that's going to prove to me, that UFOs are real. But what happened instead was I realized, wait a minute, all along we've had witnesses. If I were to see it, and unfortunately I've never had my own experience, but if I did see, for example, what Commander Fravor saw, that's it. I would be convinced. So if I just believe what Commander Fravor says, then why wouldn't I just believe what he says? He seems incredibly credible to me. And, the same can be said for so many other witnesses. He's not the only one. So that's kind of, kind of where I came from, just evolving through this subject. Probably a lot of people have a similar story where you just get more and more used to it, and you just start saying, wait a minute, why isn't this possible?
Yeah. Was there a moment in your earlier life when this grabbed you and it kind of called to you, or, kind of it lodged itself in your psyche such that you couldn't just, distract or,
actually,
get it out of your space?
Actually, so, like I said, was just percolating for decades. And it all happened about 5 years ago. I actually made a video about it because I worked through the probabilities. There's 4 little things. I don't need to go into all the details, but you can multiply the probabilities together. Like, is there a chance that there's anti-gravity, craft somewhere? Well, we have evidence of it because people keep reporting it. So there's a pretty good chance of that. Is there a chance that life is on other planets? You kind of go through this and you figure out actually the chances that aliens are here, it's like really, really high.
Right.
So that I kind of proved that in my video, and that sort of was my way of proving to myself what I think,
Right. The probability statements stack up such that, it's over the 50-50 line, and the burden of proof might have to be on those who say it cannot be. It's highly improbable that such things can exist in the universe when we know they've arisen here.
Right. One of the things that I pulled out was Operation Blue Book, right? Project Blue Book had 12,000 sightings. So many they threw away and explained, but there was still, even with their efforts to explain them away, there's still 700 that had credible data, that had anomalous, unexplainable things that they could not write off. And so I just did this quick little calculation. I said, what if that's 1% chance that you only need one of those to be right, that were being visited, right? What if there's a 1% chance that any one of those could have happened, and you have 700 of them? What's the probability that one of those was true? Right. And if you work that out, it's like 99.9%. It's very, very high.
Yeah. I love what you said as well, Commander Frazier and the other pilots who have reported this. What if we were them? What if you saw it? You would be convinced. Well, look at them. They're convinced for a reason because they actually witnessed something. John Mack established this in his research. The children of the Ariel School case were so deeply psychologically impacted by a real event. Okay. And so if you had been that child, if you'd been there.
Yeah.
So there's kind of the randomness of observation, right? It's like if we're all looking down and never looking up, if we don't have the tools to capture data regarding what is taking place in the air and the water, it's simply a matter of non-perception. Once we begin to perceive the event and pay attention and respect with some degree of social credence to those of our society who say they have perceived it, where you sit on the issue might change.
Now, as far as so back in the 90s, I actually did at NCAR some bistatic radars. So what they are is you can put a radar receiver near a normal radar, so it's a receive-only site, and you can receive the same echoes that are coming back to the normal radar, but you receive them at a different location. And it's called passive radar, and it works really well. And I developed that in the 90s. And then I saw Peter Davenport, and if you don't know that name out there, Peter Davenport is the director of the National UFO Reporting Center. And he wrote a paper in 1995 that said, hey, if we want to answer this question, are UFOs here, we should use passive radar. And he gave a bunch of examples. His paper's online. You can look at it. It's also on my website. He goes through and shows historically all the different radars, passive radar systems. It's not a new technology. So why don't we apply this to UFO, research? So I didn't see that article until about 2000. And I thought, wait a minute, I love this subject. I'm got a science background. I'd love to see it scientifically measured, not just, hearsay or whatever. And so I reached out to Peter Davenport. Now, at the time, the technology was such that it was a little bit of effort to put together that receiver, the system that it would take to make a bistatic receiver for UFO detection. Mm-hmm. But, so I didn't actually have quite the time, and it sort of went on and off talking with Peter. And then somewhere in like 2014 or 2015, I realized they have little SDR dongles you can slide into your, USB port on your computer and just digitize RF in a very simple way. And so I thought, oh, great, I'll finally put it together to do this system, UFO detector. And then I saw Avi Loeb announce that he's going to start up the Galileo project, and he's going to put out 50 telescopes. So the first thing crossed my mind is a telescope's a really awkward thing to look for UFOs with because it has a narrow field of view. What are the chances it's going to pass right through your field of view, even if you have 50? So I contacted the Galileo project and said, I think you guys need a radar because you need to detect where these things are. And then you need to, that you can use that to point your telescopes. So that's how I got involved with the Galileo project. And I built a prototype during 2021 and 2022 and proved that it worked. I actually used a paper. It was written by a guy from NATO, SHAPE headquarters, because they were thinking about using passive radar to replace their equivalent of FAA, their air surveillance radars for, commercial aviation. So they actually looked into it and developed a little system, wrote a paper in 2005. I just copied that paper and I proved to myself, hey, this thing really works. And if we have time tonight, we can look at a video I have. It just shows you what the detections look like. And, once I realized that a really small package of inexpensive hardware can get you a bistatic receiver that will let you catch this, you see anything in a 100-mile radius sphere. You see every aircraft at once. And so all the detections show up on the display at once. It's absolutely incredible. And so then right away, it occurred to me, we need a network of these across the nation. Of course, we're not going to pay scientists to deploy them. That would be $1 billion to do, let's say, 10,000 units. This is a citizen science project. And I think I can make this system into like a consumer product a citizen could buy, put it on their roof. It connects into a network. They become part of a mesh network. And all this data comes in and it actually locates positions of objects in the sky, like every object in the sky.
Fascinating. Well, this is great. We're getting right into it, and I want to learn more about passive radar. I'm sure others do as well. I thought a good way to do this, you have a great video on your website. It's right on the homepage, and where you talk about the project and the basic science. So I thought we could roll the first few minutes of that, and you say it perfectly, and then we can just dig in and talk more about the science, the capabilities, the limitations. So let's roll that, and then we'll talk it through.
Skywatch is a decentralized radar network with nationwide coverage. It accurately quantifies the motion of all objects in the sky. The network is deployed by citizens, and the data is in their hands, giving them the ability to bring about UFO disclosure themselves. Radar measurements are uniquely suited to distinguish what is human tech and what is non-human tech because they measure kinematic tracks, the bizarre zigzag motions that UFOs regularly exhibit. However, citizens do not have access to these critical data. To understand why Skywatch is the essential system citizens need for disclosure, it's necessary to understand what differentiates objects that could potentially be human-made from objects that could not be human-made. We call objects that exhibit special characteristics that indicate non-human origin objects outside the paradigm of science, or UAPs. These are objects that behave in ways that our current paradigm of science cannot understand or duplicate, even by trickery. You may be familiar with the so-called 5 observables. These characteristics mark key features associated with non-human technical vehicles. However, not all of these characteristics are unique to non-human craft. Balloons show no control surfaces or visible means of propulsion. Humans have made hypersonic missiles and planes. These do generate heat and sonic booms, but these signatures are not always detected. Humans have also engineered low observability stealth aircraft. And human-made airborne objects can and do fall into the water. The one characteristic that is unique to non-human technical vehicles is instantaneous acceleration. Human-made aircraft cannot and do not instantaneously accelerate as UFOs reportedly do. Therefore, if a nationwide network of citizen-operated instruments were to be deployed to reliably and accurately measure these kinematic tracks, these data would constitute a citizen-powered disclosure. What kind of instrument is best suited to measure kinematic tracks on a nationwide scale? To answer this, note that much of the existing UFO evidence in the public domain is in the form of pictures and videos. It's no surprise, however, that these data are inconclusive because a single camera cannot resolve distance. As such, size, velocity, and acceleration, in other words, kinematic tracks, cannot be determined. In order to resolve kinematic tracks, multiple camera angles would be needed on the same object. The useful range of a camera is about 10 kilometers, so in principle, nationwide coverage could be effected with about 1 million cameras permanently mounted across the countryside in a grid. But what about nighttime? What about clouds, rain, and fog? The ideal solution is passive radar. Passive radar can detect objects up to 100 miles away. It operates day or night and is not affected by clouds, rain, or fog. Combined in a network, they accurately measure object position and velocity to form kinematic tracks. Because of the exceptional range of passive radar, nationwide coverage would require a grid of only about 10,000 sites. Passive radar, as the name implies, is a receive-only technology. It piggybacks off of existing transmitters, such as the commercial FM radio transmitters that cover the entire nation. This is not a new technology. This is proven technology that was first used in the 1940s. Because it does not do its own transmitting, it is completely safe, undetectable, and can be made to be small, light, and inexpensive. My name is Mitch Randall.
Excellent. Thought that was a great introduction. And so let's just kind of finish up on the basic concept here. So tell us just in brief again about how passive radar can effectively identify, detect, track these anomalous vehicles, these anomalous kinematic tracks, as you described it, in a way that I didn't get all the words, but there was size, velocity, maybe one other, and provide data at a citizen level that we can then use.
Yeah, I mean, you may have seen, Flight Aware. It's shows you the location of commercial airplanes across the nation. It's based on the transponders that they're transponding. It's not a radar display. But the thing that we're talking about, this Skywatch radar system, would actually be a radar system that would show you the same kind of map, but with non-cooperative objects. Of course, we would remove all the airplanes from the display so you don't have to look at commercial jets. And what's left on the display would be non-cooperative objects. For example, what might be flying over New Jersey? I bet you they don't have transponders on them that are telling everybody their positions. And the Skywatch radar would see that, and anybody could log into the website and watch it in real time. We'd all see it at the same time if some kind of anomalous action was taken. I mean, now it's not that interesting if it just goes in a straight line at 250 miles an hour. That's something that humans can do. And so they're not going to write a scientific paper about that. On the other hand, this New Jersey flap is a great example because nobody's reporting, like, where are they coming from? Where are they going to? The officer reported that they're coming out of the ocean. So that's great witness testimony, but wouldn't it be great to see the radar show a bunch of objects and they come out of the ocean, they do something, they go back in the ocean. You could see them 24/7, track what they're doing in real time. Right. So it's an incredible capability. The military, there's a good reason why, they have a ship that's basically a floating radar. Radar is such an important tool to see what's going on in the sky. That can be the main point of a whole ship. So, it's not like, they just have people with binoculars, and that's good enough. But that's basically what humans are. What we have when we're not in the military. The military's essentially had a monopoly on radar data for decades, and it's about time, that we break that monopoly and get it ourselves.
Absolutely. I think this is so exciting because, we don't know what comes next regarding UFO, UAP. There are reports there are alleged statements about possibly a sudden NHI appearance or mass demonstration. How important would it be to have citizen-owned data that can corroborate the claims being made by the military or even by the NHI? We citizens need something we can anchor into of our own, because the possibility for deception, misinformation, or simple silence, as we might be seeing in this recent drone situation, is always there. So I think it's just, as I heard about this, it made instant sense to me. And that citizens would have the ability to track UAP. I think that needs to be in the hands of not just state actors and those with billions of dollars and the whole defense industry behind them. And also as just a tool to corroborate the claims made by the defense industry. It could be very important.
Well,
Mitch,
I think that I was just going to say, Reed, that if we had this thing, I think it might push along disclosure, right? Because for one thing, it just bring a lot of focus. There'd be a lot of people with, scientifically calibrated, data saying, hey, what's going on here? So it could really push the rate of disclosure. But I want to emphasize that it's just as important after disclosure, just for exactly what we're talking about here. We just need a way, trust but verify. Great, tell us what's going on. And then I want to see it on my screen. I want to see it actually happening.
Yeah. And trust is a huge issue with disclosure. I mean, undeniably.
Yep.
I have this equation. I don't know where I came up with this, but I call it the disclosure equation. Disclosure equals trust times evidence times source. Right. Well, with government disclosure, trust, evidence, source are all problematic, and increasingly so as the years go on. Whereas what if the trust was yes because it's us? What if the evidence yes because it's ours? What if the source, well, that would be us? So that fixes that equation, or at least offers a layer that we can put on top of whatever claims are made by government or non-government.
Yeah, and let me just throw on top of here, my background is from the National Center for Atmospheric Research. You know them well. They're the world's leader in scientific weather research. And I built, was involved with a lot of those instruments and built some of them, And so I understand how it works. And that mindset is the same thing that's going to go into this system where, this is not just going to be a radar that citizens have. It's going to be calibrated. And there'll be scientific papers written about and characterizing it, just like we did at the National Center for Atmospheric Research. You put out an instrument, but then you characterize it. You talk about its flaws, its error bars, its its strengths, its weaknesses, and all that will be published so that when there's data on the screen, it doesn't just mean something to us. It means something to the scientific community. And I think that's really important. And I didn't mention, and I'll just throw in here, but I want to leave time because I want to talk about other stuff that, but, I also want to, has a lot to do with the National UFO Reporting Center, because I want to combine human int, all that kind of data that's coming into the National UFO Reporting Center with radar tracks. And in addition to that, a cell phone app. And there are cell phone apps out there that have a video function and are aimed at trying to get triangulation. Because if you can get two videos on the same object from different locations, you can actually get a kinematic track out of that, a 3D position and 3D velocity. But the issue is that people don't turn on their phones. They don't fumble for their phones, open up an app and do all this stuff in time to see something that's really shocking, let's say. The cool thing about this is it will be tied into the radar, and the radar can say, because the radar can see so much further ahead than a phone could say. It would say, run outside, and in 20 seconds over the southwest horizon, you should, point your phone there, get ready to video. So there's a chance that we could get this multi-sensor independent data, and again, we'll calibrate that as an instrument so that we know the ins and outs and the weaknesses and strengths of the data that comes from that phone triangulation. And that will all feed into, if that's coupled then with, eyewitness reports, can be turned into a scientific paper that could just be like, gold. When you have multi-sensor data, that's like the holy grail, for a UFO sighting.
Right. I have so many questions, and I'm looking at the Q&A, and I see questions rolling in. A lot of them are the same ones I have. So I'm going to save some of mine, let the viewers ask the question. But you've talked about, you use the word 3 pillars that might form the basis of citizen disclosure and provide a path to irrefutable confirmation. And from what I've gleaned, that was the Skywatch radar network, the phone video capture tool that allows people to provide that extra sensor capture of what the radar has captured, and then the data repository that can layer these on top and also provide the opportunity for eyewitness testimony to be introduced as well. So are those the 3 pillars, and are there more potentially?
That's it. And just so you know, the phone app, it's not just video, it's video, but tagged along with it is the pointing of the camera, which is critical. Right now you see a video, you don't even know where that video was taken. You don't know what time it was taken. You don't know what direction it was pointed at. That's what a regular cell phone does. But this app would have it really down to the second and down to the the exact angle the phone is pointing at. So that's actually valuable scientific data.
Yeah.
So those are the 3 pillars, right? I think if you had that, like I said, it's a multi-sensor, acquisition, which is, you can't argue, it was some kind of radar reflection if you can also see it in a phone, it's that kind of thing.
Right. So paint a picture for us. Take us forward, let's say 3 years, and let's just imagine Goldilocks scenario. All 10,000 units have been deployed. They're operational. We're able to map the skies of this country. And let's put up a typical UFO sighting, right? So a craft transits a major metro area. It lingers or loiters for a period of time, might be minutes, might be much longer, and then poof, off it goes. So how would this system, once fully deployed, address a scenario like that?
Well, for one thing, in real time, if something is not trackable, it's uncooperative, right, with the transponders, that would show up on the screen, right, and show you like, hey, there's something going on here, right? But as soon as it makes some kind of instantaneous acceleration, and that's really the big thing that I'm focused on, because that's what really distinguishes it from, there's, things can loiter. That's something humans can do. We can loiter. But we can't instantaneously accelerate. So if we see that, it would be flagged and you would see the track on the screen. So, in a situation like that, suddenly maybe, dozens of people just happen to be looking at it at that time on the website and seeing, hey, what was that? So, that's the kind of thing that could happen. But certainly, that would become a known event, right? That would become, hey, last Tuesday, something happened in the city. And that's something that a scientist could say, okay, well, let me check out what kind of data we have. And they could go to the website and download the actual recorded data from that moment, including, the reports that were made, the witness testimony that was made. So there's context to it and descriptions of it. And, if there's happens to be a video that corresponds to it, it's like I said, it's like gold. So, it would be a pretty interesting, it would be pretty exciting for the scientist, I would say. But then, they would start writing their paper, and that's can be a lengthy, process, because they're going to go through every detail and make sure that they're not going to look like a fool when they publish it. So they're going to turn every stone over and make sure that everything is exactly what they think it is.
Right. So let's paint a picture for the average citizen user. So you live in Phoenix, let's say, the edge of Phoenix, and you've got the app. Does the app give you a notification that a craft has been detected? Okay, and it shows you where to point your camera, where to look on the horizon?
Yeah, it could happen that maybe you just happened to see something. You didn't even know, there was no alert or whatever. You were the first one to see it. Even your sighting with that app would signal out to other people with the app that they should look in the same direction. But, again, like you might be sitting watching TV or something and eating dinner, and you get a notification on your phone that says, hey, something's coming from the southwest that exhibited, instantaneous acceleration. Let's try to get another track on it. And so
Right.
you could, you go, wow, that's cool. Push a button, run outside and stand there for 20 seconds waiting, where is it? What? Here
Right.
it is, and push the record button and actually
Yeah.
get a track on that thing. Actually, if you have a cell phone, if you have two cell phones, that's triangulation. We call it independent data because it's all happening with the cell phones. But actually, if you have radar data and one cell phone, that's also confirmation. So I mean, it goes both ways. Any data is better than what we have right now. That's for sure.
Right. And I did notice, in the video on your website, you mentioned that it can track, I believe it had 15 samples per second. It could track an object at Mach 6, which is around 3,600 miles an hour, and 2,700 G-forces of acceleration. Now, outside of those parameters, what would happen?
When you're outside of those parameters, it can attenuate a little bit, so it's a little harder to see the object if it's going faster than Mach 6. But you can still track dots. You can say, well, on this frame it was here, and on this frame it was here, because this is a little different than, for example, with optical. On one frame you'd see it at this pixel, and another frame you'd see it at that pixel, and then you know how many pixels it moved and what the time was, and you can get a velocity. Well, with this radar, it's actually measuring the Doppler. So that's a direct measurement of velocity. So you're not doing any, divide by or whatever to figure out the velocity. It's actually being measured right then. So, like I said, if it goes faster than Mach 6, then you do go from frame to frame and divide by the time to figure out
I see. So you could calculate speeds 20,000, 30,000 miles an hour. It just wouldn't be a continuous track that you can monitor, at every point in its journey.
Yep, pretty much.
Okay.
So I mean,
good.
It doesn't just suddenly stop working if it's faster than Mach 6. You still have plenty of data. There's limitations that will be totally, it'll all be spelled out in the paper that describes the instrument.
Yeah. And now, is that the paper that you authored, or is that a forthcoming paper?
Yeah, it would be a forthcoming paper because it would be very specific to this product. Say, this is what this product does when it's in a network, and here's how to compute what its accuracy is based on the position of the things. And it would just be very, very detailed about this exact product.
Yeah. Okay, great. Let's talk about this key step. It seems to be the development of this consumer radar receiver device. Tell us how that would work, how people would ultimately procure one and get it into the network.
That's a great question. So right now, I'm looking for funding because there's a significant development that has to occur. It's a development of a consumer version of this that's going to be inexpensive enough where someone can buy it. It would be just like, to the consumer, it would be packaged just like something like a modem, where you get it out, take it out of a box, plug the power supply in, and plug it into the internet, and you're off and running. You don't have to know. We call it citizen science, but really it's just a citizen who's has the excitement enough to buy one and stick it in their house. So that whole development is like a 24-month development cycle, where at the end of that, we would have a supply chain manufacturing setup, inventory, and be ready to go on sale. And then, right at that 24-month period, hopefully it can be sooner, but that's what we're shooting for. Then the consumer can just go and start buying them. And the more, it will actually become useful when one unit is sold. Because one unit like I said, can see 150 kilometers out. That's a huge area, by the way, just from one receiver. But
it would not require other receivers it would not require other receivers to triangulate. It alone would be able to capture the track.
No, but it alone would be able to capture the detection, which is way better than what we have right now. And if you had that one detection and a video, you would actually be able to recover a track. So there's some parameters around that. But I'm just pointing out that it's not like, the system has to put out 10,000 units or it doesn't work yet. That's not how it is. It's one unit. It's already way better than what we have. 10 units is incredible. 10 units in
Right.
the same area, boom, So
Yeah.
it just keeps getting better and better the more and more that people buy.
So I'm sure people are wondering, what's the price tag, or what's the expected price tag at the consumer level? Do you have
Yeah.
a number yet for that?
I do. I mean, I don't know the exact details. Part of this development cycle is we'd have the first kind of revision, but then we would do a cost down revision to really try to bring that cost down. And this is for public good. So this isn't a thing where we're trying to make money. It's a thing where we're going to sell it at wholesale, essentially. So we're trying to shoot for $500, and I like to say, less than 1,000, because that gives me some wiggle room. But in our minds, we're thinking $500. And I've talked about this on Twitter. I said, there's this development cycle, and then they'll go on sale after many months, and I still am getting inundated. People want to buy it today.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure
I mean,
do.
imagine how many orders from New Jersey would have gotten if the thing were available.
Right. It'd be like a hurricane rolling in and people can't get enough plywood and bottled water. I mean, it's like,
exactly.
I mean, fly off the shelf. Interesting, like 10,000 devices at a $500 price point. I mean, are we talking like $5 million? I mean, it's
I mean, it's $500 per unit, 10,000 units. But I mean, like I said, it's at wholesale. That's going to keep the doors open. It's going to keep our support line open. We have, we can take returns. We can manufacture. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of maintaining and getting everything running.
Yeah. What are the main possible problems or hurdles that might be encountered as you go forward into the project and get to that Goldilocks phase of 10,000 deployed? Yeah,
I mean, so this is where I've been doing this for decades, right? Building instruments and building commercial products. You by the way, you wanted to know what that Time magazine
2007 invention of the year.
That was one of the inventions of the year. The iPhone was the invention of the year that year.
Hard to beat that.
Yeah, so I thought, but it was wireless power for cell phones and power tools and all sorts of things. It was the first product that was on the market with wireless power, and caught their eye. So, but again, that's was a consumer electronic thing. That's part of my background. And so when I saw the detections, that for me was the proof of concept that I needed to see. I needed to see that for myself to know how easy it was and what the ins and outs and how precarious or whatever, how reliable and robust it was. And when I saw it and when I got it working, I realized, okay, the rest is just a product development. Just turn the crank, and we have a development team ready to do that. And, we budgeted it out and we're trying to raise funds for that right now. And it's not really, it's not a Kickstarter thing. People want to tell me to go to Kickstarter, but it's not a Kickstarter thing because we're already selling the product at cost. And Kickstarter is all based on, you want to sell a product at a discounted price to the first people.
Right.
So it doesn't really fit into that model.
Right. I'll wager there's quite a few people out there who have $500 or $1,000 or $2,000 they might want to send your way. But I'll leave it up to you. You've got the business plan and the deployment plan. What is the dollar amount that you need to proceed with the project?
Oh, it's a $3.5 million development cycle, and that involves upgrades to the National UFO Reporting Center, developing the app, and developing the radar, and then the whole back end that runs collects all the data, processes it, and puts it on a display, and including the manufacturing and supply chain and support. So it's like kind of the whole 9 yards is what that's for.
That's not very much money for the whole 9 yards.
I've presented this to people, and they said, "Oh, you can't do it for 3.5. You should be asking for more." So, I feel really confident that my team can do it for that.
Yeah. Well, we need some rogue actor like the government of Liechtenstein to step in and be like, you need 3.5. How about 35? Take it. It is also a question I wanted to ask internationally. I mean, is this entirely a U.S. based deployment initially with international potential, or how does that look to you in the future?
Oh, that's a really, really good way to put it. So there's something regulations called the ITAR. So if you start playing with radars for commercial use, you have to make sure that you're not impinging on ITAR regulations, which would restrict you because it would classify your instrument as something that's defense oriented. And so then you're all of a sudden under an arms treaty requirements, et cetera, so we have to navigate to stay within the commercial side of that so that we're not under ITAR jurisdiction. And that's something that has made me just say, we're going to focus right now on the US. And as we work through those ITAR regulations, and then if we get everything cleared in just the right way, we can open it up globally.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
I'm curious about NUFORC as well, because for those who aren't aware, the National UFO Reporting Center, NUFORC, is one of possibly the key data repository for citizen sightings being reported presently in this country, possibly globally. It's cited all the time by UFO researchers in the mainstream media. Snapshots and data polls off their site are constantly in the news when UFOs are in the news. And so, what is the connection there with NUFORC and the Skywatch project?
The connection just is a personal connection with Peter Davenport, and that as you know, it's the most trusted site out there, and it's all about trust. It was, Peter told me, in no uncertain terms, people, when they call, one of the first questions they ask is, are you connected to the government? And then, I'm not going to call out names, but there's other reporting centers and reporting, places that have an unclear connection to the government. And that's not okay. So that's, I think, the reason why it's such a trusted source is because it just absolutely is robust, and he will not, like, he asks the people who he talks to and who report these things, he asks if it's okay if to share their name. If they say no, he'll never share that name. So he's very keyed into this integrity of that's kind of the hallmark of that whole thing. But so also,
would NUFORC host the data, or would this layer on top of the existing NUFORC data set? It's unclear exactly how that lays with each other. But clearly NUFORC, one thing we're hoping to do is get kind of a volunteer base to help run NUFORC so it's more responsive. And, also there's a bunch of, if you have followed Richard Geldrich, he's done some amazing stuff with just random data taken from all sorts of different sites, from old newspaper clippings and whatever. And he's figured out a way to get them to all be, put into a database with consistent search terms and consistent, dates and locations and stuff, so that when you search, like, show me everything that happened in Ohio from 1951 to 1956, it can come up. And I think I would like to see those exact kind of tools in NUFORC to modernize it in terms of, making it really, I don't know what you call that, but it's just ability to handle that kind of diverse data. Right. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Richard's feed. If anyone watching isn't already following him, I recommend it. We got to get him on the show, by the way. That would be great. That historical kind of meta-analysis, like just the completeness of the data set that you can then sort location, time of day, who reported, what their profession was. I mean, to have that kind of encyclopedic access to the data, it's out there, right? I mean, ChatGPT itself will return some amazing results. I don't know where it's getting it, but so the data is out in the public. We have to go get it. And specifically, I would say we have to go get the type of data that's going to help us understand the bigger picture of this event, which is the non-human intelligence itself.
You can have a video now that looks so real because of these AI tools and all the editing tools and stuff that are available now, but there's still an issue with context and provenance. Like, it's really hard to make a CGI video that has a good audio track, that really has somebody excited in the background or whatever, that you can tell is authentic. And then also to place it in the United States and at a certain time or a certain place. So this provenance of, it's becoming, it's hard to look at a video, not first wonder, is this just AI, especially if it's clear,
right? Yeah. I mean, they say garbage in, garbage out, but what if it's gold in? What if it's like a super tightly controlled, verified? I don't know if you could use a blockchain software or something to kind of
Yes.
triple ensure, right, that the data cannot be, it's non-fungible.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's definitely part of the plan, by the way. Yep.
Okay. Interesting. I look forward to any early details on that you can share, or is that for the next convo?
Right now I'm looking for a fundraising engineer right now. That's our technical challenge. So
right.
We're working on fundraising. The Seoul conference was a terrific opportunity for me because everybody.
And for those who don't know, you actually gave a guest lecture at the Seoul conference to around 450 people. So please share how that was and what came about from that.
Well, it was a little spontaneous. So I wasn't invited to speak, but at the very last second, they had an opening and there I was, and I got in there. So fortunately, I had presented this before, so I didn't have to make something from scratch, but I presented it and it got a tremendous response. People coming up to me. I mean, there's people that see this idea and it's like, okay, but there's some people that see this idea and the light bulb goes off. And I had a lot of people come up to me whose light bulb had gone off. Because you realize if we had this data, it would be a completely different world.
Right.
It's so powerful. Information is so powerful. And this is really important information.
Right. I mean, imagine what AI could discern, even at the level of intent, because a lot of intel people will say that, the type of craft, the movements of the craft, the shape of the craft, the way it moves could all be indications of intent. It actually could be communication, So,
right.
To gain an insight into who the beings are, why they're here, what their intent is in our human space, we need to be able to observe their motion constantly. And, is it possible that AI or good credible research could discern not just technical insight, but actually insight into the sentient, motive that's behind the wheel? Who's behind the wheel? There's the controller of the craft. Yeah. Well, it's great. I want to turn to the questions in a second here. I also just want to make a couple observations that, from where I sit, hearing you present this and hearing you at Seoul, and which was great. I'm glad you got to give that talk. I think a few powerful things stand out to me. One is, a technology like this deployed at this scale in the hands of citizens in the way that this would be, it would potentially make firsthand witnesses out of all of us. Going back to Commander Fravor, right? It's like he had an experience that convinced him that something is out there. It's like, what if we all could have that experience? What if you drop the $500? Not even that. You download the app. I mean, you're alerted, you go take a photo, you saw it with your naked eye. And so now this is guiding the human eye to the perception itself instead of hoping that we just randomly look up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, I've thought a lot about this before, like you have, you said those three things that make disclosure. I think that people, just from childhood, your parents say, don't touch the stove. It's hot. You're going to burn yourself. It's very fundamental to our upbringing to hear an authority figure say something, and then we can believe that. And then, of course, if you're going to try to make the decision yourself, there's so much uncertainty, and you have to sift through. So it's such a job to figure out what's really true. So it's so nice if an authority figure, let's say the president of the United States, comes up and says, UFOs are real. Then we all go, okay, UFOs are real. I heard it, But short of that, that's how that toothpaste just, dries up. If an official doesn't tell you, then it dries up. But the other modality is if you see it with your own eyes. So that's where we are. We're saying those officials aren't standing up. They're keeping it a secret for whatever reason. And so the general population just, can't cross that fence quite yet. But if they saw it with their own eyes, so if they bought this equipment, put it on their roof, and became part of this network where we're all seeing it with our own eyes, there's something going on in the sky that doesn't make sense. Right.
So everybody on hashtag UFO Twitter who's tired of hearing tired of the trust me bro, reality, which is, I know a guy who's in government. He said, okay, if you're tired of that, well, here you go. Mitch Randall, thank you for devising this solution, and Peter Davenport and all the others who have been, putting these tools out there. Now it seems like the funding is needed. The why is evident to me. I hope it is to those watching as well. It's now just the how and the making it happen.
Yep.
I want to also observe just, on the topic of disclosure, because here government, like you said, toothpaste comes out of the tube, it dries up, and the forces of time desiccate it and blow it away as if it never came out. And this is just an ever washing cycle, right? And and yet we also have to wonder, why is government undertaking this? Is it a slow acclimation? Is it a timed or staged disclosure? Is it simply out of the recognition that society can't handle it, but they need to know eventually? I think, interestingly, there's a strange synergy to this kind of technology being out. It both forces the hand of government, right? Because, hey, if there were 100 of your devices in the Northeast right now tracking these craft over New Jersey, it's just harder for the government to say, no, it's prosaic. It's not foreign adversarial. They can do typical drone-like maneuvers. And by the way, there's no risk. There's no threat to public safety. Okay, harder to do that, right, if there is a data set and people are snapping photos to corroborate it and making eyewitness accounts that are, location, geotagged, time-stamped in ways that are non-fungible for them to carry on that narrative. So it forces their hand. But interestingly, it also lowers the pain threshold for what we call government disclosure. Now government can confirm what the people are disclosing. It's a different dynamic than what we're in right now.
Sometimes I think if they let me build this, then I'm part of disclosure.
Yeah.
Because, it's hard to imagine there not being disclosure if this gets built. Right now it's legal. So if they stop me from building it, I don't know why. And we could all start scratching our heads. Why was this person? Why can't we have this thing? Why can't we look in the sky? It's a good question. And we don't know what's going to happen. But like you say, I just think if this gets built, it's going to force the hand and this kind of push-pull way. Maybe it's not forcing the hand. Maybe this is part of the hand,
Right, possibly. Hey, if it's not illegal, why is it not illegal? If it's this dangerous, right? If it's this capable, it should be illegal, right? Well, maybe we should act fast before they make it illegal. Or maybe it won't be made illegal because this is, from what we've heard from some of the people at the Seoul conference, Hal Puthoff and others, Lou Elizondo, there's a dilemma within government, which is how do you ready society at all levels simultaneously for the global confirmation of the presence of a non-human intelligence, especially if there are hard truths in that disclosure, either historically or in the present. And so if society is in this completely oblivious, distracted, incapable position of handling the admission, that's their assessment, not mine, might not be true. Well, let's say, okay, maybe. So let's help society get beyond that, or let's even demonstrate that society already is beyond it. I think of, go ahead.
I was going to say, if I'm part of disclosure, then I wish they'd knock on my door with the money. Let's do that.
Well, if the money's not showing up, maybe, we're still on the outside looking in. But there are these layers of disclosure. We think of it's all government, and it's like, well, it's citizen under government. Government is lateral. It's international. It's not just the USG. What about the other governments of the world? Mm-hmm. And then I would argue that it layers above that into the NHI itself. Why aren't they disclosing? Why are they operating in a state of non-disclosure? And then it might even layer beyond them into the exopolitical reality, which is why are there not forces from the exopolitical reality disclosing to us about what's happening with this visitation? And so I think it can come from any quarter, right? And I love that this is a spark in the citizen space.
I hope I'm not jumping ahead, but this idea this idea that they're saying, this is a repeated thing that's been happening. There's something in the sky. They acknowledge that it's there and that they don't know what it is, but it's not a threat. So that is completely antithetical to the military. That's not there. Everything is a threat by default, unless, it's finally identified. So it has always led me to, for me, it's just been obvious. maybe incorrectly so, but for me, it's obvious. For years now, every time they say that, I go, okay, they're in communication with the aliens. They know the intent. They're part of their plan. Somehow they're in corroboration. Because if they didn't know their plan, they would not leave the money on the table. They would be screaming that this is a huge threat, that we need to, triple the military budget, et cetera, et cetera. And they're leaving that money on the table. And I know that's antithetical also to the military.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a dangerous scenario if that's true. Like if the governments of the world are already in collaboration with no citizen involvement or awareness, like can we trust the nature of that collaboration really as being on the best interests of the human species?
Right.
That's a high risk scenario. But the other side is, they have cooperated or collaborated. They have discerned some of the intent, and they've concluded that they cannot match the capabilities. And so to come out and say it's a threat, people would say, well, what are you going to do about it? And I mean, look at this recent drone activity. Well, apparently they can't fully mitigate the nature of what's going on. And so then what is that? Hysteria? Is that the collapse of the citizen government contract? We pay our taxes. They protect us. And so I think there's a whole bundle of issues in there. And that enigma, what is the true nature of the government NHI collaboration, competition? Is there a Cold War, a hot war? By all accounts, there might be some effort to down these craft. What is that? Is that offensive action? Is it defensive action? So, inside of that black sphere, right, is probably more than one reality. But that might be part of the hard truth that makes disclosure so difficult from the perspective of those inside government. So that the citizens are, becoming firsthand witnesses. They're ontologically onboarding themselves because, they're going through the slow process of having seen it, being a part of a community of people with the tools to track it. They're not helpless, right? They have a tool in their hand. So when government confirms, let's imagine, people actually, they can go somewhere. And so I think this helps in all ways. It might be a win-win for all parties.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just going to throw in there that, let's say you are Commander Fravor. So you saw this with your own eyes and that's not one of ours. You just know, and there's no doubt. So what are the next thoughts? Because I've decided, okay, I believe they're here because of the witness testimony I've heard and just the amount of data. It just seems overwhelming to me. So I've just decided that. And I realize once you step over that fence and you realize that, okay, Earth is being visited by aliens and there's vehicles here, et cetera, you realize, oh my God, every possible crazy theory you've ever heard is actually on the table. So it's getting more towards your wheelhouse here about intent and everything.
Yeah.
But, you've heard people say they're walking down the halls of the Pentagon. Well, if, that could certainly be true. That's within the realm of possibility. They could have made.
When you say they, Mitch, who are you referring to? They?
I'm just saying, some non-human intelligence, and it can be multiple species or one of the species, or it
could be a hybrid individual that's alleged.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and then you also can look, to me, everything's like a big puzzle, kind of like a big table with a lot of puzzle pieces on it that don't fit together yet. But you've heard all these little stories. They might turn out to be garbage, but they might fit into the puzzle eventually. We've heard people say that there's, that they're walking down the halls of the Pentagon. We've heard all the abduction stories. We've heard that they're interested in the reproductive organs. We've heard people say that there's hybrids and they've talked to them. So, all these puzzle pieces could fit together into a thing where maybe the government and the aliens are part of the same team. Maybe that's why disclosure, So anyway, I don't want to go crazy here, but I'm just saying. Yeah, no,
we're gonna speculate a little bit at the backside of the show here on this episode, and I look forward to that. We assume government's got the tools to track the UAP. We assume they know, and it's like they might know half too. It might be so compartmentalized that there is no more than a few dozen people who actually know. And there are thousands of people who know 10%, but therefore cannot conclude the nature of the phenomenon. If government, let's assume they have the world's best radar, right? Which they must, right? And so they can track this, right? Well, they might be able to track it, but they can't impede these craft. They cannot manage or mitigate the nature of the transits, right? That's alarming, if true. What I love about, this citizen tracking, as well as the citizen decoding effort that I'm kind of all about, is it begins to change the operating conditions for the non-human intelligence. It's less of an environment where they can basically do and move and interact as they please. Take our oceans, for example. We have such minimal ability for ocean sensing, for tracking any object, not even prosaic, in the world's global oceans.
Right.
And so that's a problem. I mean, regardless of intent, it's a vulnerability. And as long as the operating conditions remain favorable to any actor of any intent, and there might be hostile ones out there, right? Plausible. That's a problem. And I think even just changing the operating conditions a little bit, more eyes on the sky, 10,000 nodes that can track in a 100-mile radius, basically any craft or object. So, I mean, that's meaningful. It changes the terms of the human, non-human interaction and negotiation of intents, because whatever their intent is, we have to get to our intent and ultimately negotiate the two. And we might find the two, there are points of mutual exclusivity. Like we cannot accommodate their intent in our human space. But if we cannot effectively impede their activity, we can declare our intent to the universe. We can't even track objects in our own sky, let alone our own ocean. So it's a pretty important step, I would say. I'd like to turn to the questions now. We've got a lot of them. So I'm going to put this up on screen here, and we'll just go right down the list. Mitch, these are for you, so I'll just let you reply. Okay, we've already covered this. What is the potential cost for a citizen to purchase and install a Skywatch receiver? We've got an estimate there. Once we establish that there are, in fact, craft flying in our skies using this tool, then what?
Yeah, well, why are you asking me? It's just going to be a lot of fun. That's all I can say. We need the data. I'm a believer in truth, and I can't handle not having the truth. That's not comfortable to me. And I think there's a lot of people that share that. So I just want the truth. And this will give us the truth. And there's nothing worse than uncertainty and doubt, which is what I think they're sowing, to keep us all confused and keep us not organized. So this will organize us, because there'll be no doubt about certain things.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're part of this puzzle is a certain, or part of the process is a certain a level. I mean, others have to take it from there, right? I mean, once there is undeniable data, what do we do about it as a society? Well, Mitch Randall and Ascendant AI can only go so far.
I will just throw this in. It's relevant. When I was at the Galileo Project, there was a group called the Societal Impacts Group. And the question was, what do they do if the Galileo Project finds some evidence of, we prove that there's something in the sky? And the conclusion, to my surprise, was we tell the government and let them figure out what to do with it.
Interesting.
So that's a different approach than I have. My approach is the data goes on the screen real time. And it's available real time. So if you see the data you like, you can download it. There
you go, folks. You get first dibs on the wow signal. It's not going into the federal pipe before you get to see it.
Oh, that was another thing too, that the Galileo Project, I'm not putting them down. I'm saying this was a decision that a group of scientists made based on their sensibilities. They said, what happens if we get good data? Do we share it, or do we first process it and write a paper about it and then share it? And the answer was, we process it, keep it to ourselves, and draw the conclusions, and then we put it out. That's different than me. My plan is to put the data out. It's just there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we appreciate that, the spirit of, inclusivity and public access, public first. So thank you, Mitch. This is a question here. Are there off-the-shelf solutions like motion tracking mirrors that amateur astronomers can use with their existing telescopes in order to reliably track and film these objects in flight?
One really cool thing about this network is it can generate a feed of positions, real-time track positions. So you can be on the receiving end of that feed that tells your telescope exactly where to point. So that's, this is all part of the development plan. And that particular feed might be, like a subscription or something, because we also want to keep our servers running, and there's cost to that. So we have to figure out some kind of business model to this thing that keeps it alive, like ad revenue or something that's coming in. And we haven't figured this out, but there's certain users that are going to want to see if there's an actual object track happening in real time near their telescope. They want their telescope to track it. So we will provide that feed.
Interesting.
So that's...
Yeah, I can see, once this gets off the ground, the potential collaborations with other communities, the amateur astronomer community.
Yep.
There are Skywatch, same name as your project, Skywatch parties around the country where people get together and point their telescopes at things. So kind of have to cross these bridges and see what comes next. But once the data's there, it's go time.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Next question here. I think this might be on the minds of a few people. I would like to know specifically, what is the technical nature of involved to install these citizen detection systems on our own land, the hardware, the software, where to get them? And also, does the object go inside the house, on the roof? Where? Yeah. So
it's a two-piece system. For one thing, remember, it's receive only. So there's no way an object can say, can detect that you're watching them, or, so you are in stealth mode. You're just receiving signals that are coming to you. But it's a two-piece system. There'll be a box that's, modem size kind of a box, very simple to plug in to the internet and plug power into. And we're thinking there'd be we haven't worked this out yet, but a port where you can hook a monitor up so you can see a bunch of stuff happening at your particular site, not just at the web page that shows when it's all combined together. But then, so that's one of the pieces. And the second piece is there is an antenna that goes on the roof and a cable that goes to it. So the consumer, just like a TV in the past, usually would have a TV and then you have to put an antenna on the roof. It's the same model as that.
Great. Yeah, that makes sense. I love that it's receive only, and I think a lot of people will appreciate that stealth mode.
Yeah,
makes this very accessible.
Yep. And there's because of it, there's no FCC license or any kind of issues like that would, you would think you can't run a radar here. Yeah, you can run an FM receiver here. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Here's a slightly more technical question. AARO, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, stood up by Congress, has documented UAP radar and thermal signatures. Some of the highest quality UAP videos are using shortwave infrared sensors. What advantages can radar offer as compared to a potential network of citizen infrared camera systems?
Yeah, in the video, I tried to point that out. Is the point, and let me just back up a minute. Instrument design is an art in itself. And, you can make a high quality instrument that, does really high precision measurements, et cetera, but if it never sees a UFO, who cares? So the part of this instrument design is that the statistics, the chances that you are going to just walk outside and see a UFO are pretty small. And the same with a radar, the chance that one receiver sees a UFO is relatively small. So the idea is to have a network across the whole country. So now the statistics have gone way up. Basically, if there's anything over the continental United States, one of the radars or 5 of them will see that, and they'll be able to combine their data and show a track. So wait, I got myself. I kind of lost the question. Remind me of the question.
Well, that's okay. I guess the question is about infrared camera as compared to radar.
So the thing about infrared cameras, they see about 1/10 the distance as a radar. So that means they see about 1/1000th the volume of the radar, which means you have to have about 1,000 times more of them in order to get the same kind of coverage. So infrared's great. Here's another thing about it. Let me say, the chance of seeing something is proportional to the volume that you can see. So that's a thing that Jacques Vallée figured out in a book quite a while ago. If you can see further, you see proportionally, well, the cube of that distance, you're more likely to see an object. But the chances that you see something close enough in your, let's say that your infrared instrument can see out 10 kilometers, which is pretty far actually for that. The chances that it's actually within 1 kilometer is like 1%. Most of the stuff will be outside of 1 kilometer, and most likely you'll have 3 pixels on it. So the whole point, a lot of people think I'm going to have a camera system, so because I want to see what it looks like, but you might just have 3 pixels. So if you really go through the design of the system, you realize cameras are not that great. You need a whole bunch of them in order to triangulate, and most of the time you just see a couple pixels.
Mm-hmm. Now, one notable thing on passive radar, to my understanding, totally correct me if I'm wrong, but it will not be able to actually describe the shape of a craft, the size of a craft. Is that right? It'll be detected as an object of unknown size and shape. Is that true?
That is correct. So you get a detection. You get basically a dot.
Right.
There is an amplitude to that dot, and you can make some assumptions or some. For example, it's constantly seeing airplanes. So we're going to take that data because we know what the airplanes were. So we can finally, at some point, we can say, "Oh, I see this. Minus 30 dBm is a 747, and minus 38 dBm is a Cessna 172." I mean, we might be able to make some of those kind of correlations with AI or some other algorithm that does those kind of correlations. But you're right. You're not imaging the craft. You just have a signal strength key off that you can try to work with.
I'm curious, is there any sort of like sonic technology that could be deployed as well, not to actually detect the UAP, but to say, oh, so this craft was here, it was not on the FAA, it was not known to be an aircraft, but we have a sound profile on it that resolves that it was a drone, that it was a bird, that it was a flapping balloon or something like that.
Yeah, again, you have this issue of the radius. So you could, let's say you added a microphone to each one of these systems that's of limited use, like already 1% roughly of the stuff you can see with the system, you will be able to hear. So we're being very deliberate in our design. We said, we're going to look for instantaneous acceleration with radar. And we're just trying to really focus on that because we don't want to spread ourselves too thin. And we want to deliver on time. Actually, I want to deliver ahead of time and, under cost. So we're really focused on that.
Yeah. Sometimes you see these like massive arrays of multiple cameras and infrared cameras and all sorts of sensors. And it's amazing, right? And the whole kit costs God knows how much, tens of thousands of dollars, and there's one of them. And is it where it needs to be, right? And once the object leaves its radius, what then?
Yeah, at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, we have, radars set up around the country. And what are the chances that a tornado came by one of those? These are the highest precision, best Doppler weather radars in the world. What are the chances that a tornado came across? To my knowledge, a tornado never approached one of those radars. So what we did was we built a radar truck. Again, this is instrument design. We built a radar truck to go out and find tornadoes. Now, it wasn't the most precise, best instrument ever made, but it got next to a tornado. So that's all part of the instrument design. We're not trying to make the most perfect radar. We're really trying to get the coverage to make sure we get these sightings that are, of the quality that we can draw some conclusions with.
Yeah. Right place, right time. I know Richard Dolan has postulated that there might be 50,000 credible, good UFO sightings globally per year, but he puts a factor of 10 on that minimum to say how many are seen but not reported, and then how many could have been seen, but you weren't smoking a cigarette looking up at 2 a.m. that night. So.
Well, here's another thing. What if every night there's 1,000 in the sky, but they don't have lights? You would never know.
Right. And they're going 20 or 40,000 miles an hour, faster than the human eye can perceive.
That's right.
So, yeah, I mean, it's lost data, right? It's like, our data is floating out into space right now, presumably could be picked up by any astute observer. And they're in our space and we're not collecting the data on them, right? And
Yeah,
in
we
my
gotta look.
view, in the problem of decoding intent, and the urgency to do so, primarily with an intelligence-oriented, response-oriented framework, you need the right kind of data to resolve the unknowns into fewer potential hypotheses or fewer potential conclusions. So this is really important. Let's go back to a few other questions here, and then we'll move on to some other topics. This is a question. Let's see here. This one. Is it possible that some UAP could evade this passive radar detection?
100% possible. So, we don't claim that it's going to see everything, but we certainly know of historical UFO cases where there was radar data. So we know that they do show up on radar. So, for example, the Tic Tac incident.
Yeah.
So that they had been seeing that on radar for weeks in advance of the event. That Commander Fravor reports. So we know that some of them show up. We don't have to detect every single thing and write a paper about every single thing to prove that we're being visited. We just need one.
Right. I mean, interestingly, there's radar confirmation in the way back decades ago, and there's even radar confirmation in modern times. So presumably the UAP are either not finding ways to evade it or they don't want to evade it, but that radar is able to detect these over decades and even into the present suggests that it's a viable detection method.
Yeah, and not only that, I'm of the opinion that every now and then it's another species just passing by. I think that I have no way to prove it, and that's what I'm working on. But I have a feeling that the universe is just teeming with life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we'll get into that in a minute here and talk about our postulations about that. A couple more questions, and I'm going to rattle off a few as we go through this. But Arrow has identified so-called UAP hotspots. I have this up on screen. Would Skywatch be installed in phases with priority locations corresponding to these hotspots?
Yeah, yes and no, because before it's released to the public, I'm going to be working with a couple different scientific groups that I've been talking with that have, they want to be part of the beta. So this would be, these would be the people that are writing the papers on the instrument and getting really familiar with how it works. And they may install the system, where they expect to see, a hotspot. But in the general scope of it, when it goes on sale, we just want every consumer that's at every hotspot and everywhere in between to buy one. So the idea is, we're going to cover the whole nation. That includes all the hotspots. So we're not going to, there's no reason for us to prioritize a hotspot because, it's up to the citizens who live there to buy it.
Right. And how interesting would it be to know when it leaves a hotspot, where does it then go? Does it enter the ocean in a completely random location or on an opposite coastline?
Right.
Since we have the master of the technology here, I'm going to skip ahead to the more technical questions. Would Skywatch detect the 1 to 3 gigahertz and 8 to 12 gigahertz emissions that Chris Nolan referenced from the Arrow Kirkpatrick briefing?
No, we're not using emissions. So this is using FM radio transmitters as the transmitters of opportunity. And because, for one thing, they're very high power, they're pointed at the horizon mostly, and they cover the entire nation. So they're perfect for looking at, objects where we expect to see UFOs. So we're not actually just randomly receiving all frequencies. We're receiving specifically the radio transmissions from the FM transmitter towers.
Okay. Does it detect only metallic objects or any objects? And I might add, if it's some sort of non-material object, if it's in some sort of space-time bubble, we can only speculate, but, would it be able to detect non-hard physical objects?
Yeah, I mean, this to me is the exciting thing about making a new instrument is you don't know what you're going to get. So, there could be a metal object out there that we don't see on the radar. Where it's like, why is it not on the radar? It's right there. Or there could be some blob distortion in the atmosphere that we see perfectly. We don't have any idea what's going to happen. The main point is, I hope radar's pretty good at things that are metal because, they reflect. And it's actually, it works on stuff that's not metal too, because any disturbance in the dielectric constant or the magnetic constant will reflect electromagnetic waves. So, plasma we could see potentially, we could see metal, we could see other stuff. So we'll just have to wait and see what we get.
Great. Yeah. Last tech question. What is the max altitude it can detect? Can it detect objects coming from space or going out to space?
Yeah. I mean, so when I spec the radar, it's really hard to actually come up with any numbers because every situation is a little different. It depends on what the radio transmitter is. A lot of them have different gain antennas, but most of the FM radio transmitters have antennas that are focusing the energy in a circle at the horizon. So they generally don't transmit upwards. They're trying not to transmit upwards to conserve their power and put it where the customers are going to be for the FM radio. So, I've been saying 80,000 feet. And that's some kind of estimate that I'm saying based on what I think the illumination would be at the 80,000 feet out some distance,
Yeah.
So anyway, that's about the best number I can give right now.
In the Nimitz case, I believe the objects were reported to be coming. In the Nimitz case, I believe the objects were reported to be coming from around that elevation down to the surface of the ocean in a matter of seconds. So, well, Mitch, this is great. I'm sure there's so much support for this. One person basically, let's see, it's not a question. It's $500 is a great deal. Where can I sign up? And I'm sure you get that quite a lot. I'm inundated
with that, by the way. People love it so much they don't even want to hear that it's not ready yet. They just want to buy it.
Right. Right.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah. So if you're one of those folks, support Mitch. Stay tuned, and call for this at the level of its premise and its inherent logic, which to me is self-evident. And in a state of non-disclosure by both government and NHI, we have to pursue options like this. And to press the hands of those who are the information holders. So, a big inspiration of mine and of Emergent is putting tools in the hands of people to decode this phenomenon and come to logical assessments that basically iterate forward over time as new evidence comes in and that can inform the collection of evidence. And I think this is just a perfect example of how citizens can be involved in that and can collect the evidence themselves and share it. And be a part of this event, this is an entity encounter, and we are the human species. So, Mitch, great to talk through this. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of my conversation with Mitch Randall, where we talk about citizen detection and tracking of UAP. We're now going to go into part 2 of this episode of Emergent and talk about the other side of citizen disclosure, the decoding of the intent and agendas that might be at play at the level of non-human intelligence. So please head over to part 2, where Mitch and I continue to discuss possible scenarios at play and the potential NHI agenda and intent that we might be observing in this phenomenon.